Rich Hoffman has been researching the UFO phenomenon for over 55 years. He's previously worked as a defence contractor for over 20 years and has held multiple senior positions with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Rich is co-founder and an executive board member at the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, the SCU. This is my second conversation with Rich. All relevant links are in the description. Thank you so much for doing this with me again, Rich. I really appreciate it. Let's talk today about everything that's been happening in the world of UFOs since we last spoke about maybe 8-9 months ago, something like that. Initially, let's get your thoughts on David Grusch.
Wow, you start right off the can with the top
straight
one
into
it. There's a lot of things going on, and certainly David Grusch is the top of mind. David, just want to point out, was actually at the SCU conference we had here in Huntsville, Alabama, 2 years ago. Well, actually in 2022. And we had a hybrid conference at the time. And so we had people in person, got to meet a lot of incredible people like Jay Stratton, and you had Travis Taylor, and you had, Eric Davis. All the big name people were pretty much at the conference. But there was this gentleman who was kind of quiet while we were doing things, but was very outspoken. I did get to bump into him. His name is David Grusch. And David was meeting with a lot of different people while he was there. He obviously knew Jay. He knew a number of the people that were in attendance. And I got the impression that he's extremely credible individual. He does, have all the necessary clearances way above my pay grade, if you would. I do work in the DoD, and I do have a clearance, but I don't have the level of clearances that he did. And here he was at the UAP task force level, trying to do basically his job and follow the data and see where it took him. And a lot of people, over the years that I've been engaging with a lot of former military or intelligence types and stuff like that, will all readily talk about the fact that we've had previous crash retrievals and materials that we've had in our reengineering centers and various other things, and our people are doing that. And it's not news to me. It might mean more news to the public. I mean, even if the general public would think about the fact that in 1947 you had the Roswell case. If you looked at any of that, you'd find out that, of course, the military was there and confiscated the materials and allegedly took it and tried to figure out how it worked and to put it in their labs. It's no surprise that you had the same kind of thing going on in the Kecksburg case in Pennsylvania. So we've heard about a number of craft that have been picked up by the military, taken to wherever they take them, and then they probably are doing reengineering work. So it shouldn't be any surprise to really anybody if you've followed any of a part of the UFO phenomena. But Grusch is basically just the guy that's being the whistleblower and coming out and telling people that he ran into like 40 firsthand, secondhand witnesses who actually said the same thing.
Yeah.
And either, and so he's gone to the intelligence, the basically the people that do the checking, the auditors and stuff like that. And they've looked at him and they validated it and, passed it up to the Congress and said, hey, you ought to take a look at this guy. He is credible. And of course, that led into the meeting with Tim Burchett and then people from that hearing that took place. But David is a kind of a outspoken kind of guy, well-spoken, has a very strong desire to be able to get the truth out. And based upon the NDAA that was out where it talked about the protection for whistleblowers, he took it upon himself to actually go through the proper channels to be able to come out with this thing. And he went to the IG and they said it's okay. And they passed it up. So there you go. It's one of those things where he's extremely credible, and I applaud him for doing what he's doing. And he's just basically sounding the horn for all of the others who have come forward and said the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild stuff, isn't it? I mean, a year ago, I don't think we would have necessarily thought that we'd be in this situation now. That somebody of Grusch's stature and credentials coming forward and saying the things he's saying, because he's said some wild stuff, hasn't he? I mean, obviously, you've addressed the things about the craft. That's something we've heard from various people over a long period of time, but still hearing it under oath in a congressional hearing from David Grusch, it does hit different, and it does kind of, I think. It dislodges quite a bit of stigma, I think, from it. Obviously, there's still stigma and taboo, and it's still a very controversial area, but it definitely feels different after that. What do you think of some of his other claims, like that people have been killed to keep this secret, and that we have biologics, I think is the word he famously used, basically bodies. And he even kind of, what do you make of those first? What do you think of those aspects?
So, I mean, going back to the fact that I think that he's talked to about 40 different people, he's probably heard quite a variety of things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that what he's doing is basically he's kind of like the mouthpiece for all the 40 people that he talked with, right? So what's happening is probably some of those stories that he's heard are based upon either the testimony that he's heard from like the other 40 people, and they've told him some incredible things. I don't know, I mean, I don't know that necessarily that it might have been all looked into by him. Did he, for example, see the bodies or have the evidence of that somebody was killed and they were killed by a UFO or something, or by the government or whatever? I think that he's just conveying pretty much what he's been told, and he's trying to be as truthful as possible. I would then go and say, well, the other 40 people need to be up there on the oath table and giving the same kind of testimony, and then providing their own bit of evidence to be able to support what they say. But
yeah.
But over the years, let's go back. There have been a lot of threats to people who have been a part of those experiences. Even if you look at just the Roswell case, there were a lot of threats that were conveyed to the people who were out there talking. Hey, if you keep talking about this, you're going to end up in the desert. Threats by the government, if you would. I don't know if they're necessarily carried out. But there are many things that are pretty strange out there to a lot of different people, and I would just say that there's been a number of cases where people have been threatened, who have had UFO experiences or something like that by somebody. I know of one sheriff over in Mississippi who had a situation where after his talking about the case, after he was told to shut up about it, he had some knocks at the door and some threats that were received by a military or a government kind of like looking guy, right? And they obviously knew that he was talking about it, and so it's been part of the UFO lore, if you would, if you're listening to all of the cases, that sometimes threats are made. So would it surprise me that maybe somebody was injured or damaged or killed? I don't know. That's a big stretch for me, and I'd certainly like to see the evidence. But I mean, is it within the realm of possibility? Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I look at that, would I be surprised if the government or a government would be willing to kill some people to keep a secret that was beneficial for them or that they wanted to keep? No. I personally, I would have no trouble believing that a government would kill people for their own ends. Obviously there's going to be a sliding scale, a continuum. Like, they're not just going to do that for anything, but this is clearly one of the biggest secrets, isn't it? This is one of the most tightly guarded secrets out there. Yeah, wild. So these other 40 plus whistleblowers, what do you think's going on with them? When do you think, how come all 40 of them don't step forward in unison and back up Mr. Grusch? What's happening? Are they all afraid? Are they all still watching and waiting and seeing how it's playing out? because I get that side of it. I get the watch and wait and see how it plays out, and let's see if they treat Grusch well, and then we'll go forward. But at the same time, surely if 40 people with serious credentials, and even 20 of them with serious credentials and serious CVs and what have you, if they all stepped forward and said essentially the same thing in unison, I mean, that would be heavy. It would be hard to drag these people through the mud. It would be almost impossible unless you could find that they were all part of the same, school group, or, they were all little buddies from school or something. It's impossible to, well, next to impossible. Yeah, what do you make of that? What do you make? Where are these other whistleblowers, and will we hear from them, and when, and how?
Yeah, I would think that the
potential whistleblowers, I should say.
Probably the testimony of those people has been recorded by the Inspector General and their office. I don't know. I don't know that they're all going to step forward. And in fact, the people that I know that have the information that are in the government are not going to come forward because they just don't feel comfortable with either their government jobs would be at risk, or their families would be at risk. There's a lot of stigma associated to this that has not relieved itself yet. Mm-hmm. So it's like, and being a whistleblower, often gives you a lot of critical. I mean, look at the criticisms that have been levied against Stephen Grusch, since he's come forward.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to take that on. I think that, Grusch was indicating that he's had threats to his family. Mm-hmm. So there are significant risks. And again, the people that I know that know about crash retrieval programs and things like that do not want to do it. Their current jobs won't allow them to do it. They've been muzzled, if you would. And so they're not going to do that. And I know that there are military people who have actually witnessed UFOs and filmed them and done things like that, who don't want their names mentioned. They're concerned about their jobs. They're not gonna come forward, and so it presents a challenge for us to be able to get all of the data easily to be able to have the case supported. I'll talk about that with the a case that we dealt with where that was the condition, and so it's a problem. It's still there, as much as it's lessening in terms of the stigma, but at the same time, there are still a lot of people who are very threatened by revealing what they know, and even if there is a whistleblower kind of like protection.
Yeah. Well, we just got to keep hoping, and hopefully we're going to get a Grusch similar surprise like we had with Grusch, and we're just going to wake up one day and that's how it was for me. We heard murmurs and rumors and stuff, but I had no clue that this guy was coming forward at that moment. Let me ask you something. It's a Chris Sharp tweeted recently about one of the latest, or I think the latest episode of Weaponized, or the latest as of when we're speaking, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp's podcast. So apparently, Chris said that Jeremy Corbell put this following question to James Lukatsky, who I'm sure you're familiar with, Lukatsky. He said, "You told us because you were allowed to tell us that our government has a UFO in its possession and has been able to access the inside of it, right?" And Lukatsky responded, "Yes, I was allowed to tell you." What do you make of that? Is there somebody in government giving him that permission? What does he really mean? Obviously, you don't have a definitive answer because it's somebody's statement, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, typically what happens is that if a government person is going to write a book or something of that nature, right? They have to put together this whole thing for what they call a DOPSR review, which is basically it's a review to make sure that, in essence, that you're not revealing classified information, or you're doing you can write a book. There is a thing called free speech, but you have to keep within a context that you're not revealing things. And so in the context of what I believe's happened with, Lukatsky in their new book called Inside the U.S. Government Covert Initial Program Initial Revelations, is that generally what you have there is a situation where they cleared his book as it is.
Yeah. So
what he's saying in short is that he was allowed to do that, was that the DOPSR review approved and said you could go forward making these claims and see these statements. And so I think that that's where he's talking about that he was permitted to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the same as anything that we'll hear about in Lou's book whenever that comes out. And it's similar to, I guess, the stuff Grusch has been saying, in a sense that he's had everything cleared, maybe not through the exact same review process, but still cleared on some level. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
So that Lou's book will go through the DOPSR kind of review as well. It's typical for almost all of the books you see out there about like things that are going on in the military and stuff like that, but they've got that process in place. And so I think that that's ultimately what we're talking about there. And that's what the claim is. And that's just a standard process to make sure that you're not revealing secrets.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to reading Lou's book, obviously, whenever that's going to hit the shelves. I think a lot of people are going to be looking forward to that one. Let's talk about something a little bit different. Again, not the same as David Grusch. Still related to the UFO topic, this area. These bodies that they unveiled at this Mexican hearing, these Nazca Mummies, right? That people call them. I mean, let's just start with just what do you make of that, first of all? Like, what do you think's going on there? What's that all about?
Well, I tend to basically to reject much of what comes out of Jaime Maussan's mouth.
Right. Okay.
He tends to be, how do I want to say, a promoter of just garbage.
Okay.
And sad to say that for me, it's a situation where even if you looked at the Roswell slides fiasco years and years ago, that was again him. Mm-hmm. You had a situation there where it kind of tinged, a lot of different people that went down there, including Richard Dolan, and you have Don Schmidt, who went down there, and they were all had egg on their face after coming back from that fiasco. And it wasn't even an alien at all. It was I guess a small boy. Anyway, again, you have this thing where you've got basically, it needs to. It allegedly was looked at by some sort of a lab, I guess, in the United States, and I think in Colorado or somewhere. But you need stronger peer review of all of the information, and also better access probably to the mummy or whatever it was. I don't know. It sounded to me like from what I heard that it was indicating that it was all kludged together from different pieces or body parts.
I heard the opposite as well from some people. Like, it's really hard to know, isn't it? What's accurate with this kind of thing? Because I heard one group saying like, oh, it seems like from initial analysis, it seems like it's all from one. It seems like it's all one skeleton or whatever. It's all one thing, one complete. And then I hear somebody else saying, well, it might be a skull of a llama, like coupled together with who knows what else and things like that. We need the reviews, right? We need the analysis. We need, like you say, peer reviews, and we need multiple laboratories to be able to have at it, really.
I agree. And so, in other words, a lot more scientific homework that's going to happen, where you're also you're working with various organizations before you make these claims. And it's sad to say that, I know Ryan Graves was, at that meeting, as was a number of other very credible people. And I'm sad to say that, like Ryan was extremely upset and said that he had no idea it was going to be this carnival-like effect when he went down to that meeting and was actually there. I think he definitely wouldn't have gone if he had known. But bottom line is that pretty much anything to do with Jaime Maussan is not really going to be supportive of serious scientific research at all. And it's best to stay away from it for the most part. If you look at how many mummies that have come forward, you have the Atacama kind of like small little being that's come out of the South America region. They're very much into this whole thing about these like mummies and various other kinds of things, archaeological finds, and they're finding strange things. And you have elongated heads and various other things you find. You have crystal skulls there, but there seems to be a large preponderance of these kind of things that don't pan out at all. And I don't think we're going to get further down the road with looking at these ancient mummies in the first place.
You think it's just going to kind of fizzle away? We're not going to get like labs coming forward and saying they allowed us to analyze it and we got this and this. I mean, I really hope we do. It would be very frustrating if not. What is your take on? So you said the guy, I can't remember his name. Mausen. What was it you said? The guy's name that was behind this. The
Jaime Musan.
Jaime Musan. Why would whoever was in charge of this hearing have let him pull this stunt, as it were, for now? Because until they're verified as being, authentically something, then it is kind of a stunt, right? Even if you think there's a good chance that they are authentic, even if this guy genuinely believes that, it's still pretty out there to roll them out without having any proof or analysis done, or any serious analysis. So yeah, what's your take on that side of thing? Like, why and how was this allowed to be done in this way when this person that had access to them had such a questionable past?
Jaime Maussan has been for the years, basically kind of like the television guy. He's got popularity because he's on TV, he's a journalist, and he's heard and listened to, and he's usually the one that's talking about UFO cases all the time. So he's become pretty much a central figure in the South American cultures. Okay. And people know him. And so he's kind of like the go-to guy for anything UFOs, right? So he's established himself that way, and is perceived to be a very credible individual in their culture, if you would. And so when Jaime says that he's done some sort of like work of checking into things or sending things off to labs or whatever like that, is that he becomes the promoter of that. And so naturally he would have taken that, much like we did, to Congress, if you would, or the Mexican Congress, if you would, to see if they would look at the evidence or consider it and that type of thing. And so, like, Ryan Graves was invited to talk about air safety, if you would, but he didn't get the chance to do that because of this carnival-like effect with this showing of the body and various other things that they were making alleged claims that it was an alien, if you would. Yeah. There's a lot of things about, even DNA analysis that we're not on top of yet. And so, I mean, you have to have other findings and things like that and other people looking at it. It would be nice if Dr. Gary Nolan, for example, could look at the DNA. He did that with the Atacama, alleged DNA, and found out that it was, a human. So anyway, that would be beneficial if you had a variety of other labs and various other people doing that before you make that announcement. You got to be very, very careful, but to make that kind of claim and have it backed by evidence.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it, that they did that without having already the evidence. Hopefully we will get some, like we say, some analysis on it, and we'll know one way or another, or at least be able to lean one way or another. But yeah, that's wild. Imagine if that had happened in the American congressional hearing. So you have David Fravor, you have David Grusch, and Ryan Graves. Imagine, like, you sub out one of them and you sub in some unconfirmed, unverified bodies that we're going to just roll out on trolleys and like pull the curtain up, and we don't know if it's real, but there you go. Like, I'd be convinced that somebody on some level had done that as like a stunt to set this, the march toward transparency back 20 years. That's what I would think. I'd be like, oh wow, that's a genius stroke by the secret keepers, as it were, the people that don't want this to get out. If that had happened in America. Over there, obviously, I don't know enough about the political climate and about like the hearings or anything like that. I don't know enough to. Maybe it is just like a bit of a mistake. Maybe they didn't mean for it to go down like this. I don't know.
So Ben, let me tell you something. This is, to me, it's a systemic problem. You have Jaime Maussan, who is a journalist that basically is revealing some incredible stuff, right? Mm-hmm. How is that any different than Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp revealing some very, very things? In other words, you're, and then even if you take a look at with the Grusch thing, that, I have the deepest respect for Ross Coulthard, but again, a journalist. So you have journalists that come out with these incredible stories. And what concerns me is how much science was done on it before the actual release of that information took place. And what I'm trying to tell you is, we can look at this scientifically up front and have it looked at by all those things before we make the decision of saying that, yea, verily, this is a legitimately good case and it ought to come forward. And this is going back to, a bottom line, that when, Jeremy comes out with these like videos of TV screens or something like that, that were on a naval ship, he's the one that's claiming, well, he's looked into it and done this. He may be an investigative journalist, but I guess what I'm trying to say is we're doing it in the wrong order. It ought to be going over to some sort of like an investigative group, scientifically looked at, and then you make the pronouncement that here's what you have. You've got this additional evidence to support it. Because what's happened is most of the times these things get released by these people, and then we find out later on that it was a balloon or it was something else. Mm-hmm. And that looks rather like foolish, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not the way to go and do business, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of being led along by a lot of different journalists that ought to have it really, before they make their pronouncements, ought to have it looked at by scientific organizations. And so that's what I like about what Arrow's doing, in the sense that they're collecting all of these pieces of information, doing the homework that's required, doing the hard study, finding out which ones are really beneficial to support a conclusion. And then when you've done the proper analysis, you can pass this out and say, yea, verily, these are the ones that we think that are legitimate. That's when you then come out with the journalists supporting and telling the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Last word on those bodies, those alleged bodies. Do you have any idea what the very latest is? Like, are they actually being sent to labs and X, Y, and Z? Do we know if that's happening, or do we really, do we not know very much at all? Like,
now, are you referring to the ones in South America, or
the ones that they presented at the hearing is the one I'm thinking of? But if you have something else coming to mind, by all means, let me know.
Well, no, I mean, allegedly there's been bodies that have been looked at, in various labs throughout the history of the UFO subject. I mean, even in Roswell and stuff like that. I just wasn't sure if you were talking, and then, you had the biologics that Grusch mentioned.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I wasn't sure if you were talking about those bodies, or if you're now talking about the beings that were in South America. I don't know anything more about what they're doing with those alleged bodies in South America. I've pretty much distanced myself from that whole thing, and probably have to have you talk to somebody else about it. I've been focusing on, first off, the UFO phenomena itself, the UAPs, it would call them. And that's my focus, because these other things that are out there, these claims that maybe generally don't hold water, or they, they're just distractions for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally understood. Let's get your 2 cents in brief on the NASA stuff that they've, their announcement recently that they're they're setting up a task force or a group or whatever to study this more. Is it a step forward? Is it merely good in the eyes, in the sense that, it's raising awareness and showing your everyday person that, oh, NASA are taking UFOs seriously now? Is that really all the benefit there is, or is there actually something tangible here that they could help with? I mean, obviously they could, but is it going to end up with something tangible? Are we going to get anything of interest from them?
I think that overall, I applaud Bill Nelson for basically, introducing it and saying that he was going to have a study at NASA. That's a huge step in and of itself. I think that the fact that they actually put a group together and looked at it to say, how can we, study this? We have, where our things are like for pointing out in space and finding, those things out there, and maybe we do some Earth observations as far as climate and stuff like that. But like the whole government, and I say that's from a standpoint of the military as well, that once after you've ignored this subject for so long, and now you say that you want to go and do it, and you actually want to study it, there's a whole change to your equipment that you're going to have to make to calibrate it differently, to have it set up so that it could actually go and see these things and detect them. For example, NASA is now doing a thing where they're going to take some of the satellites' radar systems and basically change them over to be more sensitive to smaller objects, So, and that takes funding to do, right? So do I expect overnight that you're going to have all the answers? No. Do I think that you'll now start to add equipment that, basically will help you to better detect them? Or you might now send up equipment to specifically go after that? I think that that's what they're trying to figure out. What do they do and how do they do it in the best way? And then how do they add value to the fact that, say, for example, there's a military report that Aero is getting. And that military report has a whole bunch of jets that were scrambled to go chase after an object that was moving around, right? Well, do you have any, for example, NASA satellites that are looking down that you can say, well, let's go look at the satellite data, and you're maybe seeing some of that, right?
Yeah.
So now you have another sensor in space that's actually detecting it. Or do you have some sort of an aircraft that was in the area for NASA that might have had some jamming or experienced some electromagnetic kind of like effects to it as it was in that area at the same time? Oh, well, that's great. Well, let's go look at that and let's get that data and add value to that specific case that was a military case. So NASA is going to be able to better balance and provide additional maybe sensors or image kind of things or whatever, or additional data that can add value to giving Aero now more data to look at.
Yeah.
And this is what we've always wanted. When I was the director for investigations in the two states that I had here, Alabama, where I live, and Mississippi, I always told the investigators, I said, look, did this witness saw something? Well, who's around the witness? Did any other neighbors see it? Is there an airport nearby? Did you go and talk to the air traffic controllers? Were there any aircraft overhead that might have seen it? And you got to think very broadly about that and say that there's additional maybe people who have seen that thing that are not talking. A lot of them don't even mention it, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, we're trying to get as many sensors, whether that's multi-sensory in terms of our human eye seeing it. You want to look at, were the animals affected? They bark. Well, they're biosensors. Do you want to go and look at the fact that the police might have been in the area and they saw it? Do you want to go and look at the air traffic control? Yeah, they might have seen it. So you need to do that with all observations in cases like this to collect additional data from those various sources, not just the one that actually reported it, but the other things as well.
Yeah. I just hope some of the extra data, because you're right, hopefully some of that is going to trickle down and we're going to actually get to see some of it, like the public. I mean, like we're going to actually get to see some more stuff, some more satellite imagery or whatever it's going to be.
Well, NASA, you can do that because they don't have the classifications that the military has, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of things in the military are that we don't want you to know about the equipment that we're using or whatever like that, and the sensor that we used or implemented. That we're now detecting these things. And so you don't come and reveal the secrets to whoever, about what you're doing. But NASA is a more public facing, and it can actually do more with the public. For example, NASA is also considering putting out some sort of an application that you could use on your cell phones to help NASA collect data. And so that's going to be beneficial, and they'll be probably more open about sharing what they're doing in terms of what they've found or what they've seen. than the military would be. And so I think that it's going to be a good thing that NASA is kind of like engaging. They can also collect from organizations that are not military, for example, like the National Weather Service, NOAA.
Yeah.
I mean, there's weather radar. Does that weather radar pick up anything? Does it see anything? Well, we can collect that. Yeah. Then you've got the FAA, of course, now reporting and they're cooperating now with Aero. And so you'll have a situation where FAA data, which, by the way, when we did our case reviews and we looked at it, we were able to get, a lot of FAA data, and then they suddenly stopped letting us have that. So you put in a FOIA request for that, they wouldn't provide it. But at least now they're going to give the radar data over to basically Aero, and at least some of that's being looked at and scrutinized to help figure that out.
Yeah. Awesome. It does feel like this in every different area is starting to move forward. Like even in areas that they weren't, it's, it's like this big machine is starting to gather a little bit of momentum with these various other offices and organizations popping up and getting involved. Hopefully NASA are going to bring us some tangible results, and hopefully Bill Nelson stays in charge of that for a while, because I think he's said some really interesting and provocative things about this topic. I guess it brings us perfectly to disclosure in general, and the march, as I said, toward transparency. Like, what does everything that's happened this year? So Grusch, mostly Grusch, he's the headliner of all of this. But what do we make of everything that's happened and everything that's led from Grusch? Like the more conversation in Congress and the media. Where does this leave us? Everybody seems to have a different opinion. Some people are really, really bullish and saying, yeah, this year, disclosure later this year, or, next year we're going to have, this kind of confirmation maybe. Or I am hearing more and more people say that they think it's going to be quite soon. Within a year or two, we might have some kind of confirmation that maybe we're not alone or something along those lines, or that we have technology that's of unknown or non-human origin. What do you think, Rich?
Well, that's a good, that's the ultimate hope. I'd like to be able to have that validation for my nearly 60 years of being in this whole phenomena thing. Yeah. To me, it's not going to be from the release of documents as you see in what used to be called the Schumer Act, but the NDAA for now 2024. Which we hope, if the Congress here gets our act together, will help approve, and it'll be signed by the president. That's trying to actually encourage, and actually demand, if you would, that organizations come forward if they did do anything with materials or anything like that. That's a pretty strong, act. I'm kind of curious to see how that would be, actually doing that kind of like legwork to get that kind of like release from organizations. How often do you think you're going to be able to go up to like Northrop Grumman and go through their closets and look for alien debris?
Exactly.
There's a question about that, right? And so I don't necessarily think that, I think that, it's a good effort. I think it's calling for transparency. The fact that they have some sort of a national or like a review organization that's going to go through and look at things, and then maybe push back on some of their classification of documents, and how they have these, like, they redact it so much that there's all just black text, or black lines across the text. They might be able to get some pushback there. I think we'll gain a little bit of an awareness about more and more about what's going on, and the confusion that's around this phenomena, and the fact that, it's, if you take a look right now, there's probably all the government sites, they've been adding UFO files, if you would. If the CIA's got it, FBI's got it, and they've been up there for many, many years. And I question how much the general public actually reads those hundreds of thousands of documents that have been released over the years.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that the general public does a lot of that, right? And so if they would, they'd see how seriously it was treated by almost every government agency in the United States out there, right? What I'd like to see is that, with all of the actions that are taking place here, I'd like to see more of a, how do I say it, more of an openness and transparency, or at least some sign of involvement from countries like Australia, New Zealand, UK, and a whole bunch of others over in Europe, to actually open up their files and also open up and address this thing seriously. This has been one of those things where it's like, let's all sit back and watch the crazy Americans deal with it. At the same time, denying to our general publics that there's anything to it and we're going to spend any time. So, I think we need a global openness, if you would, because there are cases in every one of those countries and other parts of this planet.
Yeah.
It's not just the United States thing at all.
Yeah.
And so, let's hear from other governments, and let's have them treat it very serious. But everybody's hanging on to the thread about what the United States is going to do. And okay, well, so much. We're at least, have congressional action. We've got congressional interest, but we also have congressional pushback.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you look at the fact that Tim Burchett had that open hearing, well, guess what? He's already had pressure from other Congress people saying that there's not going to be any more House Oversight Committee meetings on this subject. So you have the same, there's pushback all over the place. Lou Elizondo, when he was with ATIP, had all kinds of pushback from people above him.
Yeah.
It's still there. And so I don't know that, as much as we'd like to be able to think that we're going to have this wonderful awareness, that's going to happen, and the disclosure is going to come out and they're going to admit to it. That's going to be a very slow progress, because there's always that pushback that they're going to have to deal with at the higher levels, where people don't want that coming forward. There's going to be people that are trying to push it back into the national security apparatus, and saying that you can't talk about this. They're going to have pushback on the release of information. You're going to have organizations like I mentioned before, if Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin had something, that they don't want their intellectual capital revealed, that they're doing something with materials or whatever like that they've got. So I don't expect any kind of a big, disclosure kind of thing happening anytime within the next decade.
Yeah. It's a bit less optimistic than I was hoping for. But yeah, I mean, I can't knock you for it. I don't know where I sit. I mean, I hear some people being really optimistic, and I wish I felt that optimistic. I think I'm probably somewhere in the middle, if I had to really sit down and think about it. But yeah, I mean, I get totally what you're saying, that there's so much pushback. There's still so far to go to actually get some, to get something really, it's in essence to get a confirmation. Yeah. The idea that it could come inside a year or so, to me, is like surreal. Like I can't really quite actually, but get my head to really imagine that happening. To imagine, oh, you're watching TV. Oh, we're going live to the president. I don't know how they'd do it, but yeah, it doesn't feel. It feels surreal. That's the only way I can word it, I guess.
Yeah, go back to the point that I made earlier. I said that they're just getting aware of the fact that, for example, that they now need to add sensors to different kinds of equipment, right? To actually get confirmation of something that's there, other than what might be a calibration error on a piece of equipment, or it wasn't properly calibrated, or whatever like that. They're going to be hard pressed to get that solid evidence on a lot of different things, because so many people are not. First off, they're only getting reports from an individual or whatever like that on a case that's going forward. Well, again, it's those other sensors that can help to give additional information, so we can really learn something. Yeah. And that's not going to happen overnight. No. They got to get those things. And so the government, it's the United States government's going to be very cautious about saying that, and they're going to have to wait until they have some very weighty evidence to prove that there is something here, and they just don't accept it on blind, acceptance of just somebody saying, I saw a UFO and I got this or I got that.
Yeah.
And we need more than photographs, or more than videos. We need to understand and use other sensors to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's where Grusch comes, isn't it? I think for that idea, it's like, I see what you're saying in terms of, it's going to take a while to build up the data and things. And I guess on that side of things, that's just going to keep ticking away, keep accumulating. But on the other side, the Grusch stuff, like if that can come to a head, if it does continue, and if Grusch is able to give, names and whatever to people in these skiffs, if he ever gets in that situation, and if that moves forward on the Grusch side of things, that's where I guess we could get some kind of confirmation, because they would probably play it in the sense of like, we're finding this out with you. This was held by a secret pocket of government that didn't tell us, the public facing government, anything, and all that kind of thing. And so they'll expect us to go easy on them. That's the only way I could see it happening. But who knows? I guess we'll see. And I'll speak to you before, hopefully. So we'll see. We'll watch it eagerly and closely.
Yeah, I mean, they pretty much put a stop to any additional things to deal with, really, Grusch. The whole idea about having the closed door hearing. Well, then you have pushback about his clearance. He's doesn't have a clearance any longer, or something like that, or he's no longer a government. So so they're dealing with all of that. I think that Tim Burchett would like to be able to get it to go forward, and he's pushing kind of like a uphill, and he's got a battle where there's a pushback, coming down the hill, if you would, and so it's going to be problematic, I think, for a while. I don't know that we're going to hear more, and that's a shame, because I would think that, like you pointed out, let's bring in the 40 people that had the knowledge and put them in a skiff and have them tell their stories to whoever, the Congress or the president. Like to be able to see that happen. But then you look at the dysfunction that's going on right now in Congress. You look at, the whole, we don't even have a speaker, and and you got wars going on where that's their primary focus. Mm-hmm. I don't anticipate that this subject is going to, warrant that kind of like look over, let's say, Israel or some of the things that are going on around the globe right now. A lot of people just they have an interest in it, but we can wait.
Yeah, easy to kick the can down the road. As I say, we'll watch, and hopefully there's going to be some new developments soon that are going to fill us with a bit more optimism and positivity. Got a couple of questions here from some of my patrons. So the first one is from Jimmy the Earthling. Mr. Hoffman, where do you see the state of affairs in the UFO topic in 2 years' time, and how does the SCU fit into it?
Well, I think that, that's a good question. I appreciate that. So I think that, for the most part, I think I've addressed that the whole state of the UFO problem is going to be one of these things where it's going to be like a strong interest. There might be some additional hearings that might take place in different parts of the government. I'm hoping that that's the case, that there will be additional hearings, and other people will address the topic, even though the House Oversight Committee can't do it, right, or won't do it, or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think that there are some definite strong senators who will keep putting the National Defense Authorization Act and trying to force things to come out more in the open, and the transparency will happen. I don't know that, again, the paper chase is going to reveal any kind of like big thing for us. For us in SU, we tend to be like focusing on different aspects of the science aspects around the phenomena. And so we've been very, very transparent. If you go up on our website at explorescu.org, all of our papers, all of our things are up there, all of our press releases that we've got, all of our newsletters up there, and we're just trying to be as transparent to make up for the lack of transparency, if you would, as possible. And we're encouraging, people like NASA to get fully engaged, and we're willing to work with them. And so we're looking to build that coalition and that partnership. We're doing it around the globe, by the way. It's not just the United States. I have meetings that I'm in that I'm talking with people in Italy. I'm talking with people in Germany. I'm talking with people all over the world. And so I think that, there's a good, strong effort there to be able to build that cohesive global coalition now, not just in the United States. We've partnered with a lot of technology organizations. We're very careful about doing that. We're trying to get partners who are actually looking at putting in technological tools to go out and study this. I think you have the Galileo project is one arm of that, doing that. You've got other arms that are also doing technology pursuits. And I'm hopeful, and I'm trying to be as optimistic as I can that we can actually get technology tools that we can go to things like hotspots, or we can have more of a global collection of information, on our own. Yeah. Because whether it's classified and we never hear about it again, or whether NASA doesn't do it, we're going to continue to go and study the phenomena to the best of our ability. We just published the last paper we did was the results of our 2-year study on the nuclear cases, nuclear intentions. And we're trying to look at, is there a pattern around, nuclear sites at a certain time? Was there something maybe going on at that nuclear plant or whatever like that would be of interest to them? And we find out from our study that there was definitely a strong statistical correlation with them being at those sites at those times around those nuclear sites. And they're not just the detonation sites, they're the production sites, they're the storage sites, they're all these different places that are around there. And so we're going to keep pushing the envelope, going to keep putting out press releases. We're going to keep trying to build partnerships. And that's what we're all about. We want an open, transparent, world, if you would, around this subject. And we're starting to get a lot of cohesive results that I think will be of benefit. So keep watching us.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's a great answer, and I'm sure I will keep watching. I'm sure everybody else will. That nuclear thing that you were just mentioning, was that a big paper that you did, or how in depth was that?
Two papers.
Yeah, were they lengthy?
One was looking at the pattern recognition, to see if there was a pattern around these things compared to, in other words, was there a statistical correlation with nuclear sites over, let's say, military sites, right? And we found a strong correlation with with being over the nuclear sites. Wow. And then we looked at Hanford, we looked at Oak Ridge, we looked at Savannah, we looked at a whole variety of other places where those things happen. And then we found out that there seems to be something and we were looking at maybe 590 cases from 1945 to 1975. And you could see during that time period that there were certain things that were going on at those locations that would have been of interest. And sure enough, you have the object being there. It hovered and it was right around the perimeter or something of that. And we looked at the proximity to the actual site and what did it do. And these are excellent reports that are up there. I encourage people to take a look at them and read them.
So they're on the SCU website?
Yeah, they sure are. Yeah. But again, all of our papers were up there under, I think, a library tab or something of that nature. You can take a look at it and you'll see all those papers. And so we've got a variety of other kinds of things going on. We have, Tim Oliver in Australia is looking at, for example, propulsion effects in the atmosphere or in water, or, are there any kind of effects we've seen that indicate its means of propulsion? Mm-hmm. And if you take the Nimitz case, for example, you'll see that there was a mirage-like effect that was observed around the Tic Tac.
Yeah.
And so, okay, well, that's interesting. What would that be, and could that be? So that's a study. And then we're looking at USOs, basically, or underwater objects, and where are those things happening more frequently. Is there something about their location? Is it something about, would that tell us something? In other words, it's in the deepest part of the ocean, like Puerto Rico or something of that nature. So we're doing that kind of study, and we're looking at also, is there any what's happened with the changes of shapes over a period of time? What about size? And some of the maneuverability of the objects in terms of, banking, do certain craft make only 90-degree turns? do some of them bank, or do they anything that we can come up with in terms of looking at that? And there's this very intense study around that. And that will end up in scientific papers. We will do the peer review, and then we publish them.
Wow, awesome! That's some fascinating stuff. We might have to try and get a round 3 soon to cover some of that. Here's another question from one of my patrons, Gloria. An often asked question, as she says this, an often asked question, but what reasons do you speculate are keeping the US government from more full disclosure?
Well, let's put it this way. I would say that the biggest aspect of that is kind of like the national security, if you would, the what they apply to this thing that has been further developed over the period of the military history. Let's put it to you this way. Throughout history, militaries, when they conquer another country, will take over the technology and utilize it to their own advantage.
Yeah.
If you see, that was used by Greek fire comes as an example. If I took over, the Greeks and I would get their technology, I'd use it to my advantage, and then I would go off and have my wonderful wars. So in that context, and also here, where I'm at Redstone Arsenal, there's an organization called MISIC, which is Missile Space Intelligence Center. And what they get sent to them are all of the things that look like missiles or rockets or various other things from whenever you have a collection going on as a result of whatever. It's sent over there, and then they re-engineer it, look at it, and figure out how it works, how it functions, what materials it's made of, and they tear it apart and put it back together.
Wow.
And so, that's part of the military history. So you've got a situation where anything that would be foreign would be collected, picked up, taken to a lab, and that's where it's at, and immediately classified, and basically, nobody knows about it or hears about it, except for the few people that are working on it as a project. And then once you come up with whatever that is, you would apply it to your use. So, there's arguments about, like, for example, with Roswell in 1947, where you had craft were allegedly picked up, taken. There were a variety of metals that were mentioned. One was, by the witnesses, they talked about like a lightweight kind of material that you could crumple in your hand, and then you open up your hand and it would go back to its normal shape. Right? Yeah. So, okay. Then there was another material that was very lightweight that you couldn't bend it. You couldn't hammer it. You couldn't burn it. It wouldn't bend, but it was a very lightweight material. So interesting to know that, during the time that Project Sign, Grudge, and all those different projects that the Air Force had at Wright Field, or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, as it became to be known, the materials were sent there, and they have labs that they would tear it apart, try to figure out how it operates. And then they would leverage it was interesting to note that Battelle Memorial Institute, who is a contractor with the military, if you look at Project Grudge and various other things, Battelle was the one that was heavily involved in a lot of those reports and things like that came out. But they have relationships with labs in the DoD. So interesting enough, you find out that there is a metal that is bendable, that will return to its original shape. And that came from Battelle, the organization that was working with the UFO program as a contractor, worked with a naval ordnance lab. And the naval ordnance lab came up with this thing called nickel titanium alloy, which is nitinol. And today we see it in those bendable glasses that we wear on our heads, where the metal can bend and it can return to its shape, right? So the question is, do we take that, and by the way, we're using that on other things like, aircraft engines, space kind of means that we have these bendable alloys. Well, did that come from Roswell? And the likelihood is that probably could be the case, especially with the history of Battelle being involved with it.
Yeah.
So, I think that those are aspects of why we are in the place where we are. We use things to our advantage. We keep it within the national security climate. That keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Like I've got an agreement. I can't talk about the secret things that I deal with for the rest of my life. So, okay, well, I'm going to abide by that because, I signed an agreement and I'm going to hold to it. So, those are the things that are keeping us from getting the answers out to the general public.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I've got another patron and some listeners that have asked me over a period of time to ask some of my guests about a rather controversial topic. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about it, of course. MH370 and potential links to UFOs. This is something I'm sure you were aware of. Was like all over Twitter. There was loads of smoke around this for a while. It was really, really crazy. Everybody was, talking about this, posting different things. It was kind of all over the place. Do you think there was any fire there? Have you done any research into this? Like, and when I say fire, I mean there was smoke there. Was there fire? Was there actually something to this, or was it just, what was this whole thing about? Is there something to this?
Well, one of the things that we run across is that, half the world, is conspiracy theory. And there's a strong culture of people who are willing to accept that the earth is flat, that Kennedy is not dead, and you can just go on and on and on and listen to conspiracies from every angle that's out there, and it's sad because it's not generally based in evidence or fact, and I have seen, nor have I been privy to any evidence to suggest that UFOs are at all connected to MH370. In fact, there tends to be more evidence to the fact that it was like, actually, more like an incident where this pilot, if you would, decided that he was going to go on a suicide mission. But I don't see, I have not been focused on MH370 or whatever like that. Yeah. I haven't been focused on that at all. And so, until somebody provides me more evidence, I'm just not going to be that much interested in it. But if we had credible radar evidence that there was like something that was in the sky that was near where the craft was or something like that, or if you had ground stations from credible people that said that they saw a UFO or a UAP or something like that around it as it, whatever, then I would probably be more open to it. But I haven't seen anything that indicates that at all.
Mm-hmm. Did you see some of this like alleged satellite footage and stuff that was kind of floating around the internet about it, and alleged radar and things like that? Again, I have no way of knowing personally, like, I don't know where I stand on it. I don't know if it's, accurate or if it's been fudged or whatever. I just don't know. I'm just intrigued,
Yeah. So one of the things we've got right now is we got a situation where we all have technology at our disposal, where we can create fake UFO videos. We can create fake information. We have deep fakes that are being created of people that are saying things. We also have artificial intelligence that can do a lot of different things and manipulate our photos and videos and various other things. Yeah. I'm at the point now where, now it's, where does that data emanate from? Mm-hmm. Where does that alleged evidence have any kind of credibility? Who looked at it? Was this officially from that satellite? Was it officially, has somebody that the owner of the satellite said that, that they also have it and they can confirm provenance of where it came from? there is so much ash and trash out there in terms of what's on the internet, especially like, all the fakes that people put out there that are clickbait on YouTube. And it's just, I won't even spend my time there. There are, because we do have tools now to create some incredible looking realistic fakes. And when you go to try to like do any kind of like look into it, you find out that there's no information on it, or it was done by some guy that was using visual tools to be able to create his own little fake, and then it gets passed around, then people elaborate on it and create some sort of a conspiracy around it, and so I don't waste my time on that.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough, and no leaning either way. So the year is 2035, right? And we've continued to develop these, our technological abilities. We're just gonna have no chance, are we, by knowing what's real and what's not? And I mean that in terms of UFO videos, but also in terms of like anybody's going to be able to make a video. AI is going to be able to make a video of Rich Hoffman talking to the camera saying MH370 was taken down by a UFO, and nobody's going to know it wasn't you that said it, because it's going to look exactly right. It's going to sound exactly right. It's a terrifying future that we're heading towards. Yeah, in that sense.
And that's what I have. Let's look at it this way. When I got started on this thing, I was 13 years old, and I was like walking around. First off, we didn't have tape record. I mean, we had like a reel-to-reel kind of thing that eventually came about, but we didn't have that much. We had, Brownie cameras and eventually Polaroid cameras and various other things that came about. Our technology wasn't there. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all those things. And so you could take a look and see whether a negative to a photograph was manipulated or something like that. We learned about that. Then eventually we started getting into the digital age. And then so suddenly now you have people that are using digital tools to be able to take it. And so you could actually get in and start to look at some of the digitalization and see whether the pixels have been manipulated or anything like that. You could do those kinds of things. But it's getting harder. And the tools are getting more and more challenging to investigate, to the point where, like I'm on a History Channel show called, and this is like season 4. It's called The Proof Is Out There, and they keep providing me with like photographs and videos, and they want me to talk about it on the air. And so you'll see me on the show looking at some photo that they got off the internet. And the vast majority of them are, easily explained by looking at them as being either contrived, manipulated, or something. But what I'm trying to tell you is that you're absolutely right. By 2035, with the tools that we've got now and the advances in technology, it'll be almost impossible to do that kind of like work, because you'll have something that they'll have figured something out with, making it. And so there's where the challenge comes.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. Like these days, people getting a lot of hot water about saying something. As we say, in 12 years, you're not going to know who said what and what's real. And I know it would be like, I never said that. Oh yeah, but I've got a video of you here saying it. No, but that's not me. Yeah, but it is. Look,
it's another reason why we're looking at, I tend to focus more on the military grade equipment and the military kind of sensors, because we know that they're not, we know their purpose, their intent.
Yeah.
But it's more trustful. But, when you're getting something from Joe Schmo that's in Kokomo and you're trying to say, well, is Joe Schmo from Kokomo credible? I don't know. Does he have skills, abilities? So the problem, again, is the provenance of where it was, how it came from, who it came from. And so we tend to like focus more on those like military kinds of related things, or the better like Homeland Security kind of like things, or radars or something like that are picking it up, because again, they're multi-sensory and they're showing that there's something there, and it's coming from a piece of equipment that is not out there contriving things necessarily. It might be making mistakes, but it not contriving things, and it picks something up, right?
Yeah.
And so we tend to like look at, and also the fact that, how many videos and photos do you see of objects that are extremely blurry or indistinct or whatever they are? And to the witness, that's trying to substantiate that they saw something, right? And I understand that, and that this is my evidence that I saw something. But the problem is when the scientist looks at it and says, well, it doesn't reveal anything, it's blurry, it's out of focus, it doesn't tell us anything about the craft. So now what we're doing is we're starting to get equipment that's looking into it beyond the visible range.
Yeah.
And we're looking at electromagnetic spectrum, and we're finding out things in infrared have a certain heat kind of thing to them. Mm-hmm. And we can look at, we can look at that. We can look at, we need to see these things in other ranges of the spectrum to get a better understanding, because now we're saying, like, well, wait a minute, this object did some incredible things. It's moving like a meteor through the atmosphere, but it didn't heat up. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's quite cold.
Yeah.
In thermal. Well, how does that work?
Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, hopefully these new tools we're gonna be able to get some more information before everything is totally nobody knows whether we're coming or going in 10 years when the internet is just flooded with fake stuff. Anyway, let me ask you one last question before we wrap up part 1 of this, Rich. I just wanted to check in whether you've seen any UFOs or had any other anomalous experiences since we last spoke. So kind of in this year, basically, I suppose 2023.
Have I personally had anything? No, it's really wild because, in 2012, 2012, I had what I thought was going to be my first visual experience of seeing a UAP, right? And I thought, well, this was like an early morning. It was a beautiful October, kind of a cool morning. I was going in for a meeting, and I was getting all these reports from other people around the city of Huntsville that were seeing these objects. And I'm saying, oh, well, I'm getting multiple sightings, and they're letting me know. And they gave me the direction. And so I'm out there walking in, and I'm looking up in the sky, and they described it as being something that was like, flashing on and off and on and off. And it kept doing that, right? And eventually I was able to stand there and look at it and say, wow, yeah, I see it. Okay, now what the heck is that, right? There was just a pinpoint of light that would get very bright, and then it would go, I wouldn't see it in the blue sky anymore, and then it would go white and very bright again, and it just kept doing that. Well, I got into work, and I work at Redstone Arsenal, where Marshall Space Flight Center is, and NASA and as well, and so one person said that they saw it earlier when it was actually leaving the arsenal, and it turns out it was a NASA balloon that was cylindrical.
Yeah. And
it was, as it was moving through the sky and probably gaining altitude at the same time, it was catching the sun at the right angle to make it look bright, and it was tumbling, right? So when it was elongated, I didn't see it, and then it caught the sun, and I got a glimpse of it. And so this tumbling action allowed me to actually see the blinking on and off. Yeah. And sure enough, when I go to follow it in the MUFON database and all the reports, because I had access to seeing all the reports, over the next 4 days, I tracked this object going up in through, it went through Tennessee, and I got the reports from people that were seeing it along the way. And they described it as being cylindrical, or some people saw it as being this light. And anyway, bottom line is that there's one individual I think it was in Kentucky, that actually got a telescope out and was able to get a close-up of it. You can clearly see that it's transparent, cylindrical, and it has some sort of a sensor on it at one point. And it turned out to be the Google Loon balloon. Oh, really? It was a secret project that Google was doing with studying internet, providing internet to remote areas. And they used a NASA balloon out of Redstone to launch it, and it went all the way up into Canada. So the bottom line is that it was being tracked over 4 days as the wind direction was carrying it along. So that's my one attempt at seeing a UFO, but I've had other experiences where I've seen, for example, a 70-foot area of wheat that's completely gone. in the middle of the wheat field, in a perfect circular area, and the ground
like a crop circle, basically.
It's not a crop circle.
No.
No. When you think of a crop circle, you think of it trying to show you a pattern, and you have bent wheat, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the actual ground. The roots were all dissolved and gone in the 70-foot diameter area, and there's puffed wheat around the perimeter from the heating of the object.
And it was circular and everything as well.
Circular in the middle of the field. And there were UFO reports the night before, and the farmer comes and finds that in the middle of his field, where there's no marks of anything coming through the field, no indications of evidence. It had to come from above, and it came down, and apparently, it completely disintegrated and vaporized the roots in the center. But as you go out from the center, and there was a depression, by the way, in the center, but as you go out to the 70-foot, the area, you'll start to see a little bit of rotational pattern in the wheat. There are some little stubbles of wheat, and then you get this puff wheat around the entire thing.
Wow. And so
when you're investigating that case, you're saying, well, I think I don't need to see one. I think I've experienced something that's pretty anomalous here. So that was my aha moment, that I said that there's really something to it.
Wow. Where was that?
That was in Carrollton, Ohio, in the 70s.
Okay. And it was a 70-foot diameter, you said, circle. Because that's big, right? That's pretty big.
That's rather large, right?
Yeah.
And so that indicates that something that was at least above, came from above, that was maybe that size or close to that size or something like that. Completely, microwaved, if you would, the entire 70-foot area.
Yeah. Did the landowner or farmer have any corroborating information? Was he there? Did he see anything? Did his animals react in any way or anything like that?
No, there were UFO reports in the area overnight. He wasn't aware of them. I mean, he just woke up the next day, looked out of his window, and saw that there's a big spot where he suddenly has no wheat.
Wow.
He wasn't aware of anything like animals or anything like that were barking or anything. He didn't see an object, but again, you have strong evidence like that there's something there. And if you look even through the history of UFOs, like the Delphos, Kansas case, we have an object that comes down, and a boy and his dog are out there, and they're kind of paralyzed and even can't see because of the brightness. And the ground glowed for the next several nights and was even seen by the sheriff. And it's hydrophobic, meaning that all of the water was taken out of it, and the soil no longer emerges and becomes mud.
Wow. Did you know if the one you went to, was there any analysis done on the soil or any radiation stuff checked and that kind of thing?
Yeah, there was a microwave radiation that was found, but as far as the soil samples, we couldn't find anything that indicated anything really at all.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that there were no roots in the center at all; they were gone.
That's wild. That's amazing. That must have been really amazing to see that and to know how fresh it was. Wow. Is there anything you wanted to say? Any kind of brief words on something we haven't touched on that you wanted to, or something that we did touch on that you didn't maybe get to say your final word, or is there just anything that's popping to your mind now that you wanted to mention?
No, nothing more than the fact that I hope that we continue to advance. I hope that we do have the continued congressional action. I think there's a lot of citizens that are actually trying to push that now. There's a lot of new organizations that are cropping up in the United States, which there's even Gary Nolan has created an organization called, SOL, something Soul or something like that, Soul Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got that going on. I'm also a member of on the board of advisors for the Society for UAP Studies. That's a group that's pushing a global envelope in terms of putting together, good solid scientific papers. Mm-hmm. Where I'm partnered with UAPX, and UAPX is doing some exciting things in terms of being able to also continue their push for technology solutions, and also to be able to study and provide actual data. So I'm thrilled about that. I'm thrilled about the connections we're having with other people. I've got a project I'm working on with looking at LiDAR technologies. So I think that, I'm encouraged and optimistic that there's a good, strong push on the part of a lot of very credible scientists out there. And I applaud that effort. I think that more and more is needed, and we need to use the tools that are now becoming more and more available in terms of technology that to our advantage. And we're going to hope that everybody continues to be as transparent as possible with everything that they're doing, in spite of whatever the military does. We're going to try to continue to forge a relationship with NASA and their work. We're starting to hear more and more how they are willing to open up to using organizations like our SCU and others. And so we're hopeful that can come about as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this, Rich. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our part 2, where we're going to discuss your 5 most compelling UFO accounts or cases. So people can look forward to that. Thank you again for today. Really appreciate it. And all my best.
Thank you.
Thank you to Rich Hoffman for talking with me. Thank you to our patrons for your support. And thank you for listening. Please see the links in the description, including for the SCU and many other things. If you want to continue unraveling the universe with us, please subscribe. And if you like our content, please consider helping us keep the podcast alive via a monthly donation on Patreon. Thank you.